Leon and I have this sort of ongoing joke about the book of Proverbs. Um, Leon loves Proverbs. It's one of his favorite books. You may have noticed that we often preach from Proverbs every summer. We've done this as long as I can remember being here. And it's a great source of joy for Leon. But the joke is that I'm not the biggest fan, uh, and he often sort of pokes me and says, "Why don't you like looking at Proverbs?" And here's why. The proverb that I'm looking at today, Proverbs 10:17, is sort of a key example for me of why I struggle with the book of Proverbs. It's not because I don't like Proverbs or that Proverbs aren't helpful, but it's actually precisely the opposite. That they're actually, there's so many deep truths that are in here that sometimes I find it hard to read Proverbs and then take a mirror and look at myself and realize, oh, this the very thing that this is saying to me is what I'm not doing or what I'm struggling with. And so it's a harsh reality for me. That's not saying that we should not pay attention to it, because we definitely should. And today is the prime example. Proverbs 10:17 says this: "Whoever heeds discipline shows the way to life, but whoever ignores correction leads others astray." What is this about? Well, throughout the book of Proverbs, listening to discipline and being someone who's open to receiving correction is one of the key components that get mentioned over and over and over again. This idea that discipline is actually good for you, it's rewarding, and it makes you into a stronger and sharper person. But a fool is someone who doesn't listen, who pays no attention, that when they receive any sort of feedback, they immediately turn their brains off and reject it. Why? So why is this hard for me, and why is this ultimately a good and rewarding and godly thing? Well, since I can remember, I've always had an issue with discipline. And I've viewed it as a negative thing. And often you probably hear that word discipline, and you probably also think of it as a negative thing, right? About a parent maybe, who disciplined you when you got into trouble, and sent you to your room or grounded you, or maybe even something worse. Or maybe it was a teacher who disciplined you and kept you after school, or gave you extra work because you were misbehaving in class, right? We think of that word discipline as a negative word, and for much of my life, that's how I thought. But discipline actually doesn't mean that. If you look at the Hebrew word for discipline, it actually means to sharpen someone. It means to sharpen someone or something. It's this idea that you have like a blunt, a dull knife, right? And you try to cut something with it, try to cut a rope or something, and it's not going to work properly because it's dull. It's not doing the job that it should. So what do you do with a knife? Well, you take a sharpening stone and you sharpen the knife. You rub the stone against the knife. And I'm sure if a knife were a person, that would be quite a painful thing at times, right? It doesn't feel good to have someone turn the mirror on you and for you to realize that, oh, I'm not as sharp as I could be. But this idea of discipline is not simply like putting someone in their place and punishing them. It's actually speaking truth and love into someone's life so that they will be sharper, better, more Christ-like. And so Proverbs is talking about here in chapter 10, verse 17, that when we heed discipline, when we are open to receiving feedback from people about the things that are good, that we need work on, that maybe we're not so great at, it actually sharpens us. But if we are people that don't want to listen, that's too painful, we don't like it, we take everything personally, or we think the opposite, that actually none of what you say can actually possibly be true, we're actually just walking around as dull knives. And we're not doing the thing that we were made to do. or at least we're not doing it as well as we could. And so Proverbs wants to remind you and me that there's actually something good about being open and having other people feed into you. This concept is the concept called accountability in the Bible. And accountability simply means that you are allowing someone else into your life who is walking alongside of you, who loves you and wants the best for you, to speak truth and love into your life, even in those spaces that are uncomfortable, and that you are able to do the same thing for them. And the goal from it all is that we might be sharpened, that we might look more Christ-like, less rough, less unable to do the things that we are called to do, but that we will be sharp and ready to be used for God for even greater things. So, what discipline do you need to hear?